Now, there is news coming through. The Russian President Vladimir Putin has said that Russia would not let Ukraine get nuclear weapons. It's happening after the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has told Donald Trump that either they require a membership of NATO or they require nuclear weapons to defend themselves. Remember, Ukraine had given up nuclear weapons that it received from the Soviet Union in the 1990s. Let's put this in context. Maroof Raza is joining us on the phone line to help us understand. It's not like threats don't come from Putin, but at this point in time, where this conflict is ongoing, where you have a West Asian crisis unfolding as well, do tell us about the significance, Maroof, of what Putin is saying, that if Volodymyr Zelensky gets the West to agree on a NATO membership, then that's one option, or he wants nuclear weapons. And the moment he hears this, Putin says this will not be allowed.
Well, you know, nuclear weapons are not like AK-47 rifles that anyone can pass one on to the other. They are strategic weapons that can alter seriously the equation in any situation, any conflict. Now, Putin's got a point that he's not going to let Zelensky get hold of nuclear weapons because that would seriously escalate the situation in the Ukraine conflict. So there is that one issue. The second thing is any country that, if you remember, when they were looking at transferring weapons platforms to Ukraine, such as tanks, artillery systems, and others, there was a lot of debate within the West, and especially US and NATO countries, that what can be transferred, what should not be transferred. So I don't think nuclear weapons is going to be given very early. Mr. Zelensky, like Prime Minister Netanyahu, has made his stature relevant by being a leader at war. And he wants the situation to continue spiraling out of control because that makes him relevant in the politics of Ukraine and the geopolitics of Europe.
Right.
But I don't think nuclear weapons are going to be very easily transported from one place to another. Please take your mind back to the Cuban Missile Crisis,
Yes.
when nuclear weapons were shifted by the Russians to Cuba, and the world was in panic. I'm talking
So the
about
West will not
October
oblige,
1962.
Maroof, from what you're saying, the West is not going to oblige that kind of request, but Putin is reacting also to the possibility of a NATO membership. Is that likely? I mean, I understand what you're saying about nuclear weapons, but this membership of NATO, which was the key point on which Putin had a problem.
Well, membership of NATO is not something that you can walk in with a checkbook in your hand and say, okay, I'm going to pay for it and let me enter the club. Membership of NATO is a very complicated thing, and NATO countries guard the membership choices they offer very zealously. So they're not going to give the chance to Ukraine to become a NATO member. As you may recall, in the last 2 years, this has been held up and NATO membership is not being considered for Ukraine despite so many pitches by Mr. Zelensky about the importance of Ukraine becoming a NATO member. NATO membership and the issue about expansion of Ukraine and Russia, vice versa, into NATO territories is been the cause of the conflict. And if you, those of us who are familiar with the history,
Yes.
in 2007
But Maroof,
onwards,
I also want to ask you this because this is playing out in the heat and fire of the US presidential elections, and word coming in from Donald Trump, who is not supporting Zelensky. He is actually putting in a word for Putin. And he has said a few hours ago, I think Zelensky is one of the greatest salesmen I've ever seen. Every time he comes in, we give him $100 billion. Who else got that kind of money in history? There's never been. And that doesn't mean I don't want to help him because I feel very badly for those people. But he should never have let that war start. He's putting the onus on Zelensky for this war.
well, I don't know where the onus will lie, because the onus for starting the war, as per the American political scientist John J. Mearsheimer, is on America's doorstep. And America is the one which has pushed Zelensky and the Russians into a confrontational mode, because having first promised that they will not allow the expansion of NATO and Ukraine into areas beyond the Ural Mountains, they allowed it to happen. And Russia then responded aggressively. What we hear a lot is what is talked about in Western press and media. But please remember, the Russians have their own point of view. They're not a pushover. They're still a military superpower, and it's not going to go away overnight.
So it's important that Putin has come out saying what he has in response to Zelensky asking the West for nuclear weapons or NATO membership. Now, the direction in which this goes, of course, a lot of rhetoric is flying around, especially also, like I mentioned, while US presidential elections, we are drawing closer to the 5th of November. So all of this is in play, as also what's going on in the West Asian crisis scenario, especially now with Yahya out. We will see exactly the direction in which both these crises in the world really take shape. And we'll keep reconnecting with you, Maroof. Raza, thank you very much for joining us with your perspective tonight.
If you like this video, then like, share and subscribe to ET Now.